Nice join the channel here over at SubScribestar. So this is a cool helmet, but this is not gonna. I guess a little World War II-ish there, but it's not going to be enough to save Disney because it's beyond saving. So Star Wars Acolyte is a woke cargo cult, and what Disney did to Star Wars, it's not even annoying. Yikes, my guy! Oh, if you're SCW, please don't stop watching the video on sub if you accidentally found the channel. It's over. Star Wars is over. Star Wars has been over for 10 years when they came out with the 2015 thing. By then, you should have looked at that and go, this is the new Disney. This is the direction they want to go in. People had false expectations because they saw the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and I saw that and I thought, Disney did a really good job on this. So they're going to take this Star Wars and they're probably just going to nail it. And then you see what they come up with, and you're like, Disney has changed quite a bit since they did Pirates of the Caribbean. What lightning in a bottle they did with those movies. So it's not annoying because now I'm actually rooting for them to keep making shows that lose them money. They had the opportunity when they bought Disney. It looks like, what's that bird? The duck-billed stork or something. They had the opportunity when they bought the rights to this to pretty much just print money. It's Star Wars. That name recognition, I don't think there's anything that compares to this. But in the end, it's probably going to cost them another $1 billion in loss. And it's not just with how bad Star Wars is, and it's absolutely horrible, but there's a lot going on over the past 5 years, especially with Disney and Florida and DeSantis and their involvement. They feel they need to get involved with like child drag queens. People look at that and go, wait a minute, I thought Disney was like, what happened to Disney? This is, people were pointing out stuff in the 90s about the wokeism. I think it was Blackpilled on Odyssey was talking about that. It's like it's always been like this. It's been like this for a long time. It's just they slowly boil the frog, and I mean that's Hollywood in general. So how this is going to cost them money is because obviously they ruined Star Wars, but it's changing their brand into something like every other woke global homogenization company. I was looking up this article. I can't even name the cartoon because it's got offensive words in it. It was like the filthy people from Eastern Europe that originally came from India, I think. And it's this cartoon from, I don't know when it was published. And it was in this comic thing called Viz, I guess, that poke fun at everything and everyone, and so I looked up this article on it, and they talk about, the inevitable happened in the past few years is they poke fun at the right, and that's it. And you look for, there's a lot to go into with Biden's a mess and the whole woo-flu stuff, and no, the magazine just pokes fun at the right, and it's like that with every major brand. So Disney is kind of like the gods must be crazy. What a cargo cult is in the Pacific Islands during the war, they saw aircraft overhead and they built wooden planes to sort of honor something that they didn't understand, but they still thought it was cool. And their construction was admirable, where they get something, it looks like a plane, and it's got many of the details done well, including some of the paint, but it's an artistic interpretation, and of course it doesn't get off the ground. So Disney took the name of Star Wars, the sets, the costumes, especially the lightsaber. I mean, the whole thing with the lightsaber is they want you to focus on that, and then you look at the originals, like it was rare, and it built up to the third movie where the Jedi, a very young Jedi Skywalker, was jumping around on Jabba's palace, those floating ships over the Sarlacc, the pit, the big toothy thing where Boba Fett fell in. That was an amazing fight choreography for 1983, but it took a lot to build up. Even Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's fight was very it was the way it was supposed to be, but it was very calm. So the thing is, Disney took the name of Star Wars, the sets, the cloaks, all the stuff, and they replaced the white people who made it with non-white people. And then the story falls apart because people are not fungible. Sorry, SJWs. And I like Rogue One, but as I think back to it, I remember when they had the Asian guy in the main role, and even back then I felt something was wrong with it because it felt like Earth. It felt like Hollywood. The willing suspension of disbelief didn't work with non-white characters because the vibe of Star Wars was set with Han Solo, Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan. That was Star Wars as created by Lucas, and it worked. If you replace that setting, I immediately just see it as a Larry Fink checklist for diversity. And more importantly is all this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. You forgive issues with movies when you like the characters, you just overlook it, and that was what happened with the original Star Wars. And it doesn't happen when you feel like you're getting lectured to. You find every little fault, consciously, subconsciously, and you just don't enjoy it. And that's what has happened with Disney over the years. So the past several years has been Hollywood using these poxwalks characters, the non-whites, as their puppets to be Mary Sue characters. Shuri in Wakanda was a great example, even though actually as a person outside of acting, she's got some balls, and she was asking all the right questions about the whole Wu-Flu thing, and so was Nicki Minaj, so interesting. But the character in the movie was cringe, and in the past 10 years, almost all non-white characters are unwatchable, which means Hollywood is unwatchable, which means the whole thing is over, which is fine for me. That's what books are for, which I've kind of got back into. But Hollywood doesn't understand this because they have a completely different worldview. They hate us, and we love us. We don't value diversity, feminism, or whatever woke socialist talking points that the left wing values. So you're living kind of in an interesting time if you enjoy the history of Hollywood, because you're seeing rapid changes, which is when history gets made. You're going to see several big companies either go out of business or change their business models. You might even see the big screen model disappear. It kind of feels like that is what's going to happen. And you might eventually see the rise of an actual alternative Hollywood. And no, not the controlled right-wing, pseudo, in quotes, Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire type of cancer. That's not an alternative. Hollywood cannot even imagine that people don't share their values. A great example I was thinking of was, as I was walking, was the last indie movie and why that was such a failure, and what a great example it is of Hollywood. Because one of the reasons was it was the fifth movie, and they're set in a time when the communists would be the natural enemy, but they used time-traveling Hugo Boss instead. And a black girl boss was one of the federal agents, and then there's another girl power thing in it that kind of showed up indie, and the result was nobody watched it, and a movie with that kind of name recognition lost a ton of money. People are done with World War II movies, and that genre has been done to death over the past how many years, especially the German thing, as them as the bad guys. Things change over war, perspectives shift, and what has happened over time is people realize that things are complicated and they want to see more nuanced perspectives on things instead of the same story told over and over again. Like, tell it from their point of view, tell it with the English and American as the antagonist, something different, because people are just beyond bored with this narrative that, one side was the bad guys and people just didn't turn up to watch it. And I think people were probably surprised that they went in that direction, because in current year, the communist Antifa and BLM would be the issue, not the right wing. But that's just to tell the left wing that it's inconceivable to them. So a lot of what Hollywood does doesn't make sense because they are communists. So Hollywood's not going to make a movie exploring that topic, and Hollywood runs out of safe targets, which is basically what you've seen over the past 10, 20, 30 years is European people bad, blonde people, blue eyes bad, and all the bad guys are out of that World War II model of Nordic central casting, and the audience just does not care anymore. It's been done to death. But if you try to tell them to make a movie with the Axis as the protagonist, they just look at you with a blank stare. It's the blue screen in their minds. They just cannot understand that. It's like, well, if you can't tell both sides of a story, by definition, you're making propaganda, and they're obviously fine with that. Anyway, so they have the Acolyte, where they wear Star Wars like a parasite controls a host, where at a distance it looks like Star Wars, but as you get close, it just turns into standard globalist Hollywood propaganda, and it's impossible to talk to libs about it because for them, everything has to be a vehicle for propaganda, and they can't discuss things without having an emotional response. There's a scene where she cuts her hair. She got long hair, and she puts her head forward, and then she uses the laser sword. It's so dumb, and then she tosses her head back. And I know the people who wrote that thought it was going to be so cool, and it just looks really stupid. So the Acolyte has nothing that makes Star Wars Star Wars. The simple question is, do black girls support Star Wars? No. So why are they in the show at all? Your peak Star Wars audience would be Euro-American men in their 50s and their kids and then their grandkids. That audience started to disappear in 2015 with the first Disney movies. Nobody cares about girl power because women aren't men. They're the object to be rescued and married to have kids with. So while the movies made money, they didn't create anything to build on, and they didn't sell any toys or other merchandise, and they were out of the cultural zeitgeist immediately. There was just no vibe around them, where the original was just something you had to, and it was before most of our time, but you can go back and watch YouTube videos about what people, how excited people were for a science fiction movie that was just entirely different. And now Star Wars streaming is falling apart because who's the audience? The characters are women and pox and woks and non-whites and the people who don't watch the show. And in the logic of the left wing, they go, well, representation matters, you bigots. But that works two ways. The white audience isn't watching the non-white Star Wars. Why would they? It's not Star Wars, and it doesn't represent them. And I don't know if there's BLT stuff in Star Wars yet. I mean, that would just be the nail in the coffin if you make characters. Oh, I think in the movies, wasn't there a kiss? I don't know. Like watching those movies, even to review them, was brutally challenged. So if Disney made Star Wars that looked like the 77 Star Wars, they would have made money, but they're willing to lose money to push this anti-white globalist narrative that the audience that supported Star Wars doesn't matter, which is insane when you don't have a new audience line up. And you see it happen with everything in pop culture. From comics, I think was probably the start, and one Richard Myers over at Diversity in Comics was the guy who turned everyone on to that concept. And then it went to movies. I mean, it's been movies like this for a long time, and now video games are finally getting destroyed, and board games with Dungeons and Dragons, which is great. Because it's happening anyway. So when it's happening anyway, you might as well accelerate it. You can't just replace people and expect the same results, and the only counter argument they have is ad hominem and straw man, but the audience doesn't care. And if anything, people are getting more politically incorrect because they've called them all sorts of nonsense for over and over again, and finally it's like it just loses its sting. You're like, so if we don't watch this $150 billion corporate propaganda from Disney, some blue-haired lispy person on Twitter is going to call us, Hugo Boss. Yeah, we don't care. We don't care at all. Anyway, so how well is the Acolyte doing in comparison to everything else? Oh, not well. And to be fair, I haven't heard of any of these other things, but it doesn't look like it's doing amazing. Have you guys considered making something the audience is on board with? But who wouldn't want to see this? The audience doesn't exist. That's who doesn't want to see it. Why don't the left wing who say they love this kind of stuff, why aren't they turning up? And they never had that conversation because I guess it's I guess it's embarrassing to them. And Leslie Headland did this interview where she didn't know if it was going to get a second season, which means obviously it's not going to. It lost money this season, and a second season would lose even more money. And when the Daisy Ridley movie comes out, it's going to be the second Star Wars movie after Solo to lose money, which it wasn't even that bad. And that will just be the end of Disney Star Wars. If they keep making shows, they're just going to further destroy the brand, and they've gone a long way towards that. But they'd be better off to sell it to another company, and other people are going like, oh, just put it on the shelf, just wait 10 years. I don't think that works because the audience gets smaller every year, where they'd be better selling it to someone like Apple right now, where it's still worth some money, and like not that Apple's going to be any different, but theoretically another company could buy it and go, you know what, we're going to return to the old vibe of the original Star Wars, and that's going to connect with a new audience. And it would, like, it's just not going to happen. So now Star Wars is a dead brand. Name a company that would buy it and make something that's not woke. It doesn't exist because every major company is tied in with BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and it's all these people behind the scenes. So if there ever was a time for an alternative Hollywood, it's going to be pretty soon, where you're going to have people. It takes a lot of money to start up a movie company that is not woke. I don't know what you call it, like a traditional movie company with movies from an earlier time. But eventually the balance becomes so out of whack, where you have mainstream Hollywood, it's just making nonsense that doesn't sell to people, where investors will look at it and go, you know what, if we could get a couple $100 million together, we're guaranteed to make money. It'd be crazy not to do it. So eventually you're going to see something like that start to happen. Anyway, yeah. What's the problem with Star Wars? Right here is the problem with Star Wars. Is this your audience? No. So why is a woman in charge of Star Wars in the first place? Because I think she's a lesbian woman, so that's why she's in charge of Star Wars. And she's Weinstein's assistant. So, there's that whole rabbit hole to go down. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See y'all on SubScribeStar and Odyssey. I'll see you guys next episode.